Did you watch today the funeral of Shereen Abu Aqleh? Did you see that the coffin bearing her body and carried on the shoulders of Palestinians was about to fall to the ground in front of the gates of St. Joseph's French hospital when Israeli forces attacked the mourners? Did you also see how the Palestinian flags were snatched savagely from the hands of the mourners, only to reappear time and again during the funeral at the Greek Catholic Church, and then on the way to the cemetery on Mount Zion? Did you spot all the Muslims and Christians in the church? The diplomats from European countries? Did you also notice the head of Al Jazeera attending the funeral and going to the cemetery too? Did you hear the bells of all the churches in Jerusalem peal as the coffin was carried from the church to the cemetery? Welcome to Intuitive Reactions, the MENA and Gulf regions. This is number 44 on Friday, the 13th of May. Shereen, in her last media hooray over the past 3 days since she was murdered, succeeded to unite Palestinians. So did you notice that factional flags did not appear at any of the venues, only the Palestinian one? It was one flag and one Palestinian people, both in Palestine as well as in the diaspora, resisting the mechanics of a sinister occupation. Perhaps, just perhaps, it is time for Arab normalizing countries, as well as European ones and the USA, to go beyond statements, denunciations, condemnations, and to revisit their positions on peaceful forms of resistance, such as BDS, instead of opposing it, like some countries, most notably and painfully for me, Germany. Today, as Palestinians mourned their martyr, Israel advanced plans for 4,427 Jewish settler homes. Now remember, about 475,000 settlers already live in the West Bank, alongside some 2.7 million Palestinians in communities widely regarded as illegal under international law. Settlement monitor Peace Now, Achshav Shalom, has warned how settlements are deepening the occupation, whilst conversely, the right-wing Interior Minister Ayelet Shaked, a member of Bennett's religious nationalist Yamina party, hailed this day when settlements are being planted, further settlements on occupied territory, as a day of celebration for the settler movement. With Shereen's murder, I believe that the mask of occupation has fallen once more. Just look at the way Israeli police maltreated Palestinians today. It is apartheid, as Human Rights Watch, as Amnesty International, and as B'Tselem have avowed, where arrogance and impunity by one set of people thinking of themselves as being superior, talk to another, behave toward another in demeaning ways and try to humiliate them because they are inferior and they do not count. But will all this that you saw perhaps on your television screens, on YouTube, or perhaps even elsewhere, will all this in the last 3 days, since that bullet killed Shereen Abu Aqleh until she was buried in the cemetery, will all this shift your attitude? Will you, whoever you are, realize that facile statements like Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East is an oxymoron when you have two peoples, one victim, the other victimizer? Perhaps you wouldn't care. You're far more interested in your iPhone working or browsing Facebook. Perhaps you wouldn't care because in your own mind, South Africa is different from Palestine, and that Ukraine is different from Palestine too. But the heinous attitude of an occupying power says a completely different story. And Shereen, who was born in Jerusalem, lived in a suburb in Beit Hanina, went to school when she was a young girl in pigtails to the Rosary Sisters, acquired American citizenship, and worked for 25 years with Al Jazeera News, has paid once more to this travesty. Now, as a conflict resolution practitioner myself, my whole legal deontology abhors violence. I always try to find a compromise, a mediation, a middle ground. But today, having seen what I witnessed, I merely invite you, dear viewers, wherever you are, and no matter whether you're a politician, a religious man, whatever and whomever you are, I merely invite you to dig deep into your soul and to examine your consciences. Shereen is an icon now. She didn't think of herself as an icon. I don't think so. She didn't even think of herself as a martyr. She was just a very competent and stubborn journalist. But fate had a different opinion. So the story, the last chapter of her story, of her living story, was written in Jenin. It went through Nablus, it went through Ramallah, it went through Jerusalem, it went through the church, and it ended up in the cemetery. So whilst that chapter is over, and whilst I say, Allah yarhamha, may she rest in peace next to her mom and dad, I also add that what she achieved in those 3 days is yet another nail in the coffin of oppression and suppression. Just think of what you saw in the last 3 days.